It really is the moment, in a way, you've been waiting for, because it's the culmination of all of the facts and data that the principals and Ann and Cindy have shared with you about our instructional program. And what Fred and I are going to try and do is tie this up with a bow so that it makes some sense to you. We're going to talk about what this looks like in action. How does it affect our staff, and how does it affect our budget? So just a quick reminder of our core values that we've lived through this year, lived with this year, and lived by. And it's the bottom of all of our paperwork. It is at the essence of our work when we work as a leadership team and what we're trying to do in the buildings. Now, each of these slides that I'm going to show you, what you'll see is you will see when there's an addition, it's bolded and underlined. And when there is a reduction, it is also bolded and underlined. And I broke it down into a few different areas. So we have the big ideas of transformational technology, enrichment, and STEAM, flexible learning spaces, social emotional wellness, community connections, school safety, and professional development. These are all areas that the principals and Ann have spoken to you about over the last few weeks. So it makes some sense. Our first stop. Bill gave a presentation tonight speaking specifically about the equipment that will be needed as a component of us going forward into next year. It's about $275,000 in just the equipment costs that Bill presented you tonight. I mentioned about the middle school. I did some quick averaging. The elementaries are about 41%, and the high school is about 48% deployment. So in other words, at any given time, you could have 41% of the middle school, elementary school students sitting in front of a device. And I didn't even include iPads. Probably a lot more if you include the iPads. So that means a physical computer at a desktop or a portable device. Everyone has talked about PD as a component of that. And everyone has also mentioned the importance of the work that Kara Buckley has done this year with instructional tech and assistive tech. And assistive tech is how our special ed students are able to capitalize on technology to improve their outcomes. So what we're asking is, we're going to redefine a little bit here. The state mandate is that we have a minimum of 0.5 librarians based on the number of students in the middle school. So we'd like to reduce that middle school librarian position in order to gain additional assistive and instructional technology support. We can't go forward with the equipment if our staff don't know what to do. So it's a break-even proposition. And we'll continue with the one full-time of Kara in assistive tech.
Brian, was that position just like trial and error for this year, right?
We did. We gave it 1 year, and it's a special instructional assignment for her. So she would, if she chose to continue it, she would continue in that role. This person would join her. And we've talked about a few models of who would do what responsibilities in that. But what we've learned is when you've got, I don't know, anyone want to hazard a guess? How many individual pieces of technology do we have in the district? 1,400? And 420 staff, 222 instructional staff, now including TAs. That is a lot of people to teach and tell the story to. And I haven't even gotten to teaching the students. So the additional help will be very welcome.
It's on. Okay. So we feel as a district that we are positioned to do a lot around STEAM. STEAM being science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And one of the things that came through loud and clear in our principals' presentations was the idea around inquiry-based, project-based learning. Our elementary principals really want to think strategically about this library position that's opening up in the elementary schools and rehire that position as a STEAM teacher. So someone that could be shared, much like you would think of art, but then think of adding science, technology, some engineering to that as well. That would allow for some vertical connectedness between what we're doing at the middle school with Project Lead the Way in the high school. It would allow for teachers to really do a lot more with integration within their curriculum for science and technology, and I think it would just bring a lot of engagement to that. We would look into really utilizing what we already have, so think about those outdoor learning spaces that we have at each building, creating some sort of science kit that can be kind of like a grab and go, so curriculum that I can take and really bring to life. So we'd want to think about that and create some science kits around that. Continue to use our wind block, which we just had talked about a little bit, and that's not just remediation, that would be enrichment as well. One of the things that came through was the idea of those enrichment staff members who are at the schools not being able to necessarily get to everyone, I should say, and a STEAM type of teacher will be able to continue to do that work with every student. So every student, in addition to their PE, music, art, they would get this STEAM time during the week. Of course, we'd continue to build energy, pun intended for STEAM, around Project Lead the Way. And then one of the things that we just had our first meeting on last week, which I think is going to create some really great dynamic partnerships for our district, is the STEAM team advisory to the superintendent. So we looked at what are those vertical connections between our kindergarten and 12th grade and really utilize those opportunities to do some really cool stuff in our district.
Last week, Deb Newbart at Becker said the most awesome thing about what she wants to see happen in the library is like the STEAM heart of the building. Library space being recreated and made into the project-based learning capital of that building, both for experience in students and the professional development that could come out of it. She said it a lot more eloquently than I did, but it was really, really, it leads right to flexible spaces, so we'll go right into that.
She said the hub. It would be the hub, the hub of the building. So when you think flexible learning spaces, for those who are in education, sometimes you think flexible seating, so things like stability balls and standing desks. It can mean that, but it's so much more than that. It's really thinking about flexible places to learn. So we want to think about, especially at our elementary, we've already done lots of work in our elementary libraries, but just think about some innovative ways to repurpose that space to do more hands-on project-based learning types of things within the library spaces, especially if we're going to have that STEAM position available to do some of that hands-on work. We want to look at things like even this library, the space that we're in. What are some creative things that we can do within this space that maybe we can do a makerspace? Maybe we can think about ways to flexibly allow students to collaborate and then present to their peers within this space. So here are just some pictures and examples of what spaces look like. Sometimes you'll hear the buzz term Makerspace, and Makerspace is really a project-based learning space that usually has a technology component, but there's materials available for students to not just explore, but to really think about researching topics and then coming up with a hands-on project to go along with that.
As we move forward, and Fred's going to talk specifically about how we'll answer some of the discussions we've had about social emotional supports, but also what Ann and Cindy just discussed in behavioral supports in the building. How do we plan ahead 2 to 5 years for our bringing our students back into district and to bolster those programs? This is another example of us moving in a step in that direction. And I will note before we go one more step that our proposals tonight do not add a single staff member or remove a single staff member. These are all trades for retirees or repurposing people we have. Just wanted to say that before we go any farther.
So Cindy, to give Ms. Heron props, she's really kind of taken the lead with looking into the satellite mental health clinic that she had mentioned. The addition of the funding there is really because we're looking at 2 different models, and without getting into specifics, there's one that would come with a person that would quote-unquote belong to us, that we could utilize. The other possibility is that it would be a satellite that would use our space. Our students and families could absolutely utilize that person and that resource, but we might not actually have a person. And we can get into that. I don't want to go deeply into that, but there's the idea that we will have on-site on-site support for students and families that might have some mental health needs. Yeah, go ahead.
And I guess it's more, and we can get into details or specifics, is the difference between we have social worker, we have school psychologists, behavioral specialists, that's somebody different, right?
Correct.
I guess I'm just trying to put all these titles and people together and what they actually do. I mean, is this something a social worker, school psychologist doesn't do?
And actually, the role itself can come from any one of those people personnel or student support classifications, a psychologist, social worker, guidance counselor, and there's one more, but I can't remember what it is. What they would actually do is they would help do student evaluations, and they would help with the professional training for our staff to assist beyond the scope of their own caseload. We have school psychologists and social workers and guidance counselors. Their role is not to teach other staff, although they sometimes do. They may offer that through modeling, or they may come and evaluate. This person would have responsibility both for helping with the evaluation of some students, but it's also their role is to help evaluate program and to inform how all staff, general ed and special ed, are able to best meet the needs of our students with these behavioral challenges. We've never had one. That's what I was told it'll do. But you know what? Fred comes from a district that had a behavior specialist. He can speak to that probably a little more accurately.
So just going back to the mental health clinic, one of the things that we have to, and again, it's a pretty tedious process of collecting data and looking at different anecdotal data. One of the things they look at is something as simple as bus lines for people to be able to access mental health outside of this area. And we know about our busing here. So there are people who can't access mental health resources because they don't have transportation. That's just a little piece, and we have to look through all of that. So the idea that this would be a mental health clinic that would really help to support some of our families and most neediest students. So that's the mental health clinic.
And just to clarify, it's our students.
It's our students.
When he says families, he means students and the families of students. We're not servicing adult community members. We're servicing our children, just to clarify.
Role of other parts of government by doing this?
We are a part of government.
We are, but we're not a mental health facility.
We are a mental health facility.
We're an educational facility.
We are an educational facility, too.
I understand that there's mental health components, but by bringing in an entire mental health clinic, I think we're taking on the role that the county has performed in the past, that other parts of government have performed, and I'm not sure that we want to bring this type of thing into the general population of our school.
It's already here.
We're here.
No.
Every single one of those children is here right now without help, without access to help.
No.
Yes.
No, we just said that part of the reason to do this is to be able to bring back some of those intensive case things. Maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe we don't necessarily need to bring them back. We don't have the capacity for that type of. It's sitting totally wrong with me to put a mental health clinic in a public school. It doesn't.
And what this is, and I understand. That's why I stopped to clarify about families versus children. But I understand your trepidation, and we know a lot of schools very similar to us who have overcome that. The important thing to know is that those children are here, and in all honesty, as we hosted these conversations, none of them were about identifying kids out of district that we can bring back because we have it. Not one discussion was had about this. This was not a plan to bring kids back. This was a plan to meet the needs of our dozens and dozens and hundreds of children are victims of trauma who have survived these things, and they can't learn because they don't have the resource. And we will talk a little about the two models since we're here. The $30,000 is if we go with the BOCES model. And what happens is in the following year, we would get back about 46% of that $30,000. What it allows us to do is that staff member would be our RCS staff member, and BOCES helps to subsidize it. And they'd be able to work with both students who are receiving Medicaid and those that aren't. If we had an outside agency come in, for instance, Parsons, come in and have someone hosted here, they would not be our employee. That means that they wouldn't be able to attend meetings. They wouldn't be able to come to this board meeting, have a discussion with you. They're not our employee. They're someone else's employee. and they will only work with students who have Medicaid. Poverty can be one of those influences of trauma, but there are a lot of people who are not in poverty, who have been victims of trauma, or have depression, or have other mental illness. We're trying to close the gap because I'll be the first to say we have we're blessed with our student support services, and it is not enough to do what we need to do. All these pieces are linked together.
I just wanted to piggyback on that because I also think that, going back to that early intervention, that some of the issues that we could help to alleviate later on can be by supporting families early on. And if you have a parent that learns adequate parenting skills through that tool, it may help us much more on the tail end.
I get that, but we are not that is not our purpose. We are here to educate the kids. We are not here to provide...
But that model's not there anymore.
We are not here to provide all the mental services for every kid that comes through. We're here to provide education. And I think it's a slippery slope, and we're starting to take on more and more and more, and we're not going to be able to survive that. We're not going to be able to fund it. The community won't support it. I mean, the budgets are crazy the way it is. We're adding more and more people that aren't teachers to our educational staff.
What if we looked at it a different way and we have a student that becomes such a high risk to us later on that we don't have any supports in place to possibly prevent really bad deeds from happening? Those systems in place can be that first line of defense before it rolls downhill.
I don't like it. I don't
and
think we need to have a mental health.
I think we have, there's more and more research around this kind of comprehensive approach to behavior, that we can look to districts similar to ours, and we can do that. We can report to that are having success with this type of work.
I'm not saying that it's not going to be successful bringing in all these other people. I'm saying it's not our job. We're an educational facility. If we brought in we could keep bringing in all these mental health professionals, and yes, it's going to help. But that's not our role in society. We have other agencies that do that. There's the county mental health, right? We have other state agencies that take care of that. I don't think that's an educational thing.
I like to think of it as a sixth grader comes to us and his pants are on fire. I'm not the fire marshal, but I have the responsibility to try and put it out so the kid can come to class and do what he needs to do. We've got kids with their pants on fire. And having mental health in our program won't increase the amount of mental illness. It will only help to diminish it. That's our thought.
Do we already have some of these costs? Like, do we pay consultants already to do some of this work? Or is this something that's totally different? I mean, do we have certain situations we have to pay a consultant to do some of this?
This is different types of work. They would have a regular caseload of students that they would see. Like I said, with the two models, each of them would bill Medicaid, just like we do now for certain services that we offer, that we get reimbursed for, which helps to subsidize the expense of some of our existing staff.
Yeah, that's fine. I just know that we hire a lot of consultants in that department, and bringing this, maybe it saves us money not having to hire consultants. I was just wondering if there's more cost savings.
We do have in the special education grant funds monies for consultants for behavior intervention. It's somewhat limited at this point, and it's targeted for individual students. It usually is accessed through the elementary buildings.
Okay. Thank you.
I personally like that we're trying to get creative. I think we've seen that, how we have to administer education is changing before our eyes, whether it's through technology or society. I like that we're looking at every position we have and trying to see how we can best deploy them to educate our students. I guess my only ask would be, as we've asked with everything, is accountability, making sure that we're seeing benefits from this that we want to, and make sure it's sustainable, because while budgets have been a little bit better recently, it wasn't long ago where we had to lay off many people. So I don't want to see us build something good here and then as soon as there's a downturn, it's unsustainable. So just make sure we're thinking about 3 to 5 years when we're doing this kind of stuff.
We want to make sure that the last 2 bullets is really around professional development. You'll see that a lot around professional development for all of our staff around, and we've already started this work, and we're seeing a lot of folks who are really interested in continuing this work around trauma sensitivity, using strategies for mindfulness, and then restorative practice is really a different way of looking at discipline. It's really helping to build those soft skills that we know our students need and able to empathize with their peers, talk to their peers, be able to not just blow up, but figure out and have the self-awareness to say, okay, I know what my triggers are, and like every responsible adult, I have to figure out ways to be able to deal with those triggers. So we're going to continue to do that work as well.
And we'll see if it's working, and we'll continue it, or we'll, pivot. We're not too proud. We've done that on other things, and I think Teddy just brought up a good point. We did the instructional technologist last year, see how it worked. It was a hit, did well, and now we're supporting it. So I don't know if that's another way to look at it, but I think we've proven we need to do something different, and I appreciate you guys thinking outside the box.
And going back to that, especially as we partner with someone around the mental health piece, we have to, there's the accountability pieces in there with it. I mean, we had to collect so much data just to say, like, we're in need. Yeah. So I think it's a good point.
Amy and Sandy just discussed these top 2 things, which they allow their career-based exploration that allows our students to go out into the community. That's definitely a priority for us. It came out through the forum. We're going to continue to have forums to hear members of our community and our staff, because we have to develop a strategic plan. We can't do that without input. One of the additions for these community connections is by increasing our field trip budget line by about $9,000, which will help us take those trips in various places, and that'll be included in Joanne's budget as well when she talks about that. Obviously, school safety is a huge consideration right now all across the country. Bill talked a little bit about smart schools. There's some safety information or safety equipment that'll be coming as a component of that. Through our construction, each of our entryways and front lobbies and offices are being redone, and we've been working with need and risk management for the last 3 years now, and they've been enormously helpful at helping us get to where we need to go to ensure that we're in compliance, but we also know where we need to go when there's a crisis. There may or may not be money coming from the state concerning additional resource officers in school districts. We don't want to wait. We have a meeting with a couple other superintendents. Myself are going to be speaking with Albany County, because we believe there's a great benefit in having a relationship with both agencies. We need the relationship with the Coeymans Police because they know our students in this place, and the relationship with Albany County will benefit us because they can service all of our schools, and they also have relationships that go far beyond the reach of our individual district. By committing $50,000, we hope to enter into an intermunicipal agreement with one of these agencies in order to get an additional resource officer in the district. You heard Joe and Lisa talk about the high school and our need to intervene on behalf of our students who are not getting to where they need to go. This is just one model and one conceptualization of this. By reclaiming some of our bits and pieces of staffing, because whenever we schedule, the intricacies of a high school schedule are complex. In our district, it's even more complex because we're small and we have fantastic offerings from AP to UHS, the college in the classroom, as well as our business classes and all the rest of the specials that are there. So with that, we end up with bits and pieces of staff, 0.2 FTE, 0.4 FTE that are usually made available to do academic intervention. We want to reclaim some of these and organize a school. And I threw a name on it this morning. I called Lisa and Joe. How does this sound? How about boot camp, where students could come in for 10 weeks, students that are struggling, and they get run through exactly what they need to do. The skills that they need, the survival that they need, the academic prowess that they need, and then they get sent back into the population. There's a little vaccination. We don't offer anything like this other than ongoing 10th period or ongoing AIS support every other day. But this idea is a very focus on a particular audience to turn them around before it's too late. The second one on there is in the same vein. We do 8th grade, 9th grade transition this summer, but what we don't do is we don't do some professional development with our 8th graders. How many people think all 8th graders are ready to cross the parking lot and be graduates? No one's raising their hand. They're not by a long shot. This is our opportunity to do PD with our kids so they are ready, or more ready, to do their job when they enter the high school. And they're exploring a couple different credit recovery things. Some of the expenditure you saw in Bill's software line may have been reflective of that, but we know that we're using some resources now and we're thinking of adapting to a different one so we can do some electronic and in-person credit recovery. Any questions about that?
Are we talking about this summer?
Credit recovery in the summer?
The boot camp?
No, it'll be during the year.
So they'd be pulled from their regular...
They would be.
And put...
But they'd be taught by subject-specific specialists. So we wouldn't pull them out and have them taught by a math teacher all day. We'd have subject-specific specialists to help them get to where they need to go in the subject. They've been traveling to a couple districts, Shannon, Scotia, Glenville. Shannon, Schenectady, to look at a couple of their models. And it's not to say that their specific model will work. I have my own model from Gilman when I came there. Fred has his own experiences as well. The idea is to disrupt it. What happens is when we don't stop the machine, if we don't disrupt what's happening academically, socially, emotionally, they drop out. And stopping it earlier, obviously, is the key. Most of these programs get nestled in the 9th grade. We haven't talked about where this particular program will be, but a lot of them are nestled in 9th grade because that's where our kids get stuck. You rarely get a senior who gets stuck. You get 9th graders and sometimes 10th graders, and they end up aging out and they drop out of school.
Don't we have a classroom in the high school already that we formed like last year, a couple years ago, that has a special teacher in it, that has students that can go there for special instruction or one-on-one instruction?
My first year here 8 years ago was the last year of the vestiges of that program, which was called Propel. It was the last year of that. And because of staffing needs, it pretty much disappeared. Staffing and budgetary needs, it disappeared. The only thing we do have now is we have one TA who is there to help support those students that are struggling, and I think that's primarily with 9th graders. So they don't necessarily, although they're skilled, they don't have the subject expertise to help with those kids. And we can't say the word professional development enough. We've said it 1,000 times over these presentations. And these are some of the topics that we'll be looking at through professional development. And as a component of getting better at what it is we need to do, we've added $20,000 to the professional development budget. To Bray's point, there are ever-increasing challenges that we're faced with, and we're having to adapt. The skills that we learned in school 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago are not sufficient to meet the needs of sometimes the students that are sitting right in front of us today. And that'll also include curriculum development that we've got to do. They're changing the standards, national state standards again, as well as development of common assessments. So this all culminates. We expect that our students are going to have improved academic outcomes and social emotional outcomes because we're investing in that. And ideally, someday we'll get to 100% graduation rate. Ideally, we'll be at our 85 plus when we get to this June. But that is the sole purpose of why we're here. Everything that we're doing is intended to get those kids across the stage successfully so that they can be productive when they leave. Any questions?